Hi, this is Stu Richards. Thank you for joining us today on our conversation on engaging SMBs with podcasts and webcasts. I'm excited to have a conversation with Rob Parsons, who is manager of content at Paychecks. What I wanted to do as people are logging in is to give you a little bit of background on Bredin. For those of you who haven't been on a Fastcast before or gotten our emails, we are a boutique agency that specializes in helping clients to better understand and engage the small to mid-sized business segment. That often begs the question, what do we mean when we say SMB? And the short answer is it completely depends on our client's definition. We tend to think of SMBs as under 500 employees, but we've worked with clients who define them by it might be revenue, or it might be headcount, or stage of business, or industry, or location, or you name it. You can see the clients with whom we've worked over the years, and we've conducted research for them and developed outreach programs, ultimately with the objective of helping them to achieve their revenue goals in the small business space. And as I mentioned, we do that in two ways. The first thing we do is to conduct research among SMBs. As you can see on the left, we can research all different kinds of SMBs, whether it is by the role, for example, the principal or owner, or there might be someone within the organization that we really want to target, like a head of marketing or a head of HR, head of IT. And we might want to target someone in the C-suite all the way down to a sole contributor. And we might want to focus on folks in individual metro areas all the way around to worldwide, or at different levels of industry specificity. It might be very broad, or we might want to zero in just specifically on, accountants or doctors or venture capitalists, or you name it. So we can segment the audience lots and lots in different ways, and we can reach into the commercial space as needed. We can also survey consumers. We've done that sometimes to understand, for example, what's consumer interest in shopping at small businesses. But our core competence, of course, is targeting the small business audience across a wide range of topics. You can see in the kind of orange column the things that we've explored for our clients. Methodologically, we're pretty agnostic. We can do qualitative research for exploratory, whether it's live or in-person focus groups, or conducting in-depth interviews, and quantitative research, of course, whether it's full custom or using our monthly SMB Pulse survey of 500 principals of US small businesses. Analytics, we offer a wide range, really determines what the program objectives are on the part of our client. Typically, we'll provide crosstabs or SIG testing, but we can do all sorts of assessments to determine, for example, what's the optimal price point, or what's the optimal product or service configuration to offer, which is the best market segment to pursue. And at the end of the day, the research that we do is designed really to support either internal strategy decision making, which might be around best go-to-market strategy, for example, on media or messaging. It might be around optimizing the product, might be around understanding and improving the customer experience, or we might conduct research simply to generate data for use in outbound programs like content, PR, social, sales collateral, you name it. The other side of the house at Bredin is developing content that can, of course, be based on research that we do. We do a lot of research and content programs, like conducting a survey and generating a white paper or webcast or infographic, or you name it. But it doesn't have to be. It can be very advisory oriented. We do lots of that as well. Or it might even be, product or service related. But whatever it is that we develop is really designed to support the objectives and cater to the pain points of your specific target audience. And you own it, by the way. We don't, if we were to work with you, we don't have a library of syndicated content. We create custom content specifically, again, really to highlight to your target audience the specific benefits of a relationship with you. So that said, what I wanted to do was to focus on our topic of the day, which is specifically around webinars and webcasts. And as a content shop and a research agency, we do a fair amount of research around content. And specifically, we did a survey not too long ago using the SMB Pulse. You can see at the bottom, it's a survey of 500 principals of US small businesses. And specifically in this question, we wanted to understand for different formats, how likely they are to use them to first learn about products and services. So that, at the top of the sales funnel, of course, articles, email newsletters, if you look at the data in aggregate, which is really going to be most reflective of the responses of very small businesses, those really pop up. What's interesting though, if you look on the far right, VSB, by the way, that just stands for very small business, 20 and under employees. Small business, 20 to 99 employees. Mid-sized business is 100 to 500 employees. And what really jumps out is the bigger the business, the more likely they are to consume every kind of content, or rather, I should say, to use every kind of content to first learn about your offerings. And the second thing that jumps out is that webinars and webcasts are pretty popular, ranging to very popular on the part, especially of mid-sized businesses. You can see 93% of the mid-sized business principals that we surveyed said they're likely to first learn about products and services from webcasts. And 87%, again, almost 9 out of 10, said they're likely to learn about products and services from podcasts. So obviously very effective tactics to reach larger, small businesses, but they might also be great tactics depending on if you're working in the smaller business segment. The younger the respondents that you're targeting, the more likely they are to use webcasts. A little bit of variability by industry, but again, these tools, we find these formats are very effective, in particular for reaching bigger businesses, those with 20 or more employees. But what I really want to do is bring in our expert on webcasts and podcasts, Rob Parsons, from Paychex, a manager of brand and content. And so, Rob, I wanted to ask if you're there.
I am here, Stu. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Whoops, I'm sorry. What I wanted to do, Rob, is first of all, get your take. Well, first of all, thank you for attending the Fastcast today, but I'd love to get your take on the slide that I just showed. So, what that showed fundamentally is that webcasts and podcasts are useful at the awareness stage of the sales cycle, and in particular for larger businesses. But I'd love to get your take on, whether you've seen that that's true at other stages of the sales cycle, perhaps even more so, and what kind of businesses you found are most kind of receptive or responsive to webcasts and podcasts.
First of all, thanks for having me, Stu. And this is a great topic, and we've been learning a lot as we go through it on our own and working with partners and working with best practices.
Great.
I can tell you, when you're looking at the funnel, podcasts are higher up in the funnel than webinars. In general, podcasts are going out to an unknown audience. They aren't anything that's a gated asset. You don't have to register for a podcast. You just log onto your Spotify or your Apple Music and you play it. You enjoy it. So it's very much a top of funnel brand building awareness type of activity. Webinars and webcasts, for the most part, you're promoting to a known audience. There are opportunities with paid advertising and some organic social to make people aware of these webinar events. But in general, what you're doing is you're sending out, maybe via a newsletter, maybe via a house list you already have, maybe via a sales team who are prospecting. You have a list of people that you're inviting to this event and inviting them to register. So that's a real difference there, and it also influences the type of content and how you present it and how you make it work following the event.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's a great observation, Rob. That definitely speaks to your experience. So I want to take a step back and have you tell us why it is that you started the podcast and webcast program, and how often you do them, and what kind of topics you cover.
Our webcast and webinar program has been going on for at least a decade, many years. It's a great way to present. What's great is it's a great way to present complex information in a multimedia format, just as we've done here. You're showing data on screen that people can consume visually, but there's somebody talking over it to provide a little more color and explanation to what they're seeing. So it's not a passive piece of content like an article or an ebook. And it's not just like a video where it's only coming one way and it's all pre-recorded and pre-scripted. A webinar or a webcast gives you an opportunity to accept some Q&A from an audience, to have guest speakers who can come in and add their own insights. It's a more free-flowing way to present a lot of complex content.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasts, on the other hand, it's audio only. It's a very audible approach. They typically are smaller, more bite-sized nuggets. And by bite-size, I'm saying 15, 20 minutes max. And they're consumed by a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. My daughters love true crime, and that's what they listen to for their podcasts. They pass time when they're on commutes or when they're on traveling. That's the kind of content they like to consume. We started our podcast 3 years ago because we had articles, ebooks, webinars, but we weren't taking advantage of that additional channel, which was growing dramatically and is now a very significant channel, as your data and research showed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. And I wanted to dig into that. Are you finding, or as you're developing your plans, are you offering more advice, for example, around HR best practices, or are you more product specific in the webcasts and podcasts that you offer?
I would say the podcast, as higher up in the funnel, is very about providing useful information. And one of the great things about that medium is you can bring in experts and have a nice free-flowing interview, a discussion about a topic. I've had a couple guests on recently, and we were talking about financial fitness and issues like shift swapping and pay on demand. And we were not talking about products per se. What we were talking about is challenges that employees are facing, that business owners are facing, and what are some of the things you can think about for solving those problems. So very top of funnel, making people aware that there are opportunities to do things better, but we don't like to explicitly point to a solution in these conversations. We really like to bring people from all over the industry in to bring expertise and bring knowledge so that people can just consume this at their pace and get better and find value in that. Mm-hmm. Our webinars, I would put at 80 to 90% educational. That same format. We'll provide research, we'll provide best practices, we'll provide advice. But we do, in those formats at the end, do like to give a little bit of how can Paychex help. It is our venue. We are putting these on, so it's a missed opportunity if you don't talk about how you can help people address that solution. And we have platforms that allow you to run polls. So you can ask people are you interested in talking to an expert further about this? Is this a solution you may be interested in, or is this a problem you may be having? We may be able to help you out. So we solicit people requesting more information at the end of the event as well. So we're further down the funnel there, but we're certainly not all the way to I'm making a decision based on a webinar. It's very much, oh, that's a problem I had. Oh, Paychex does have an answer. I may want to speak to somebody more deeply about that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. It's interesting, when you talk about recording a podcast and then sort of sending it out into the void, people can listen anytime, no registration required. How do you measure success? With a webcast, clearly, you know exactly who registered, you know exactly who attended. How do you measure success or attribute their, contribution to the sales funnel?
Yeah, once again, that's a challenge. And the KPIs have to match the medium, they have to match the objectives.
Yep.
So a lot of it is just raw downloads. Yep. It's almost old-fashioned advertising. What are my costs per impression? What is the reach? How am I getting out there? How many people are seeing this? How many people are sharing it? So for podcasts, that's the bulk of it. And podcasts do offer this opportunity for those that do want to dig deeper. You can watch them online. You can dig into show notes, and we can provide clickable links that we can then track with UTM codes and see who's interacting with additional assets that we provide. But that certainly isn't the primary KPI. That's really just a way of, if somebody is interested, helping move them down the funnel It very much is measured via downloads, where people are coming from different channels, and that type of information. Versus, you're correct, like a webinar, we know who's registered. They're a known quantity. They're a known lead, so we can see where they are in the sales cycle, see if they're turning into an MQL, see if they're turning into a sale. We can track them much more closely at this point.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about the program parameters, Rob. How long are the webcasts and the podcasts? And, have you kind of optimized for a, time of day, day of week, frequency that you feel is working best for those programs?
Yes, on both. When I started my podcast, the Pulse podcast, a little over 3 years ago now, we were interviewing HR experts, and I was really enjoying the interviews, Stu. They were good, deep conversations on interesting topics, like why you have to onboard managers differently than you do regular employees, why not all turnover is bad, and how you can manage turnover for a more successful organizational structure.
Sure.
Good meaty topics. And we were talking for a half hour, 40 minutes, digging in deeply. Well, when you look at the metrics, you can see that people fall off after 10, 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So our producer, Laura Matthews, has been coaching me rigorously, and I'm getting better at it now, of having a shorter conversation, being more concise, and trying to keep it to 15 minutes or less, really giving people the heart of the content right away, getting to the nub if we can. And what we found is, if it is a deeper conversation, if it is a guest who's bringing a lot of great insight, we'll split it into 2 episodes. So people can listen to one on the way to work, can listen to one on the way back. And it's just a little more consumable in these smaller 15-minute or less format.
Are you implying we should end this conversation now?
Not now, but you might want to turn this into a 2-episode event.
I'm just kidding. But no, it's interesting.
Thing we learned, Stu, though, was also interesting, was a consistency.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think of yourself as a radio program or as a television program. A podcast lives for repeat listens, lives for an audience you build who's interested in you as the host, interested in the content you're providing, and has an expectation that I will get a new episode of the Bredin Fastcast every Thursday, or a Thursday every week, or the first Thursday of every month. Whatever that cadence is, you want to be publishing on a regular schedule so people get what they expect, because that's how people listen to podcasts. They're waiting for that next episode. They don't find them randomly. Well, they do find them randomly. I stand corrected. But when they start to like something, they don't want it to be random. They want to know when it's coming. So we'll publish. We have a series of different podcasts, and we'll drop them at midnight on Tuesday, or at midnight on Wednesday, or midnight on Thursday. So when people wake up that day, there's the fresh episode waiting for them. And we'll run weekly schedules or bi-weekly schedules. During the height of the pandemic, our Thrive podcast, we were running 2 times a week because there was just so much change, so much going on. It was really important information. So the cadence is key, and consistency is key.
Yep. Well, that's great. And by the way, if you're listening to this conversation, if you have any questions for Rob, please feel free to enter them. There's a question section over on the right-hand section of your screen, if you'd like to have Rob answer any questions of your own. But another question for you, Rob, with promotion, obviously for webcasts, as you mentioned, it might be a house list that you're driving to, or promoting it on your website, or some kind of rented list. What have you found works best to promote webcasts and podcasts?
Promoting webcasts, we found the house list tends to work the best. The house list in our newsletter list tends to be very effective.
Yep.
There are other tools. Certainly everybody listening knows that there's tools around organic social, there's paid advertising, there's sales enablement. There's a lot of tools you can leverage to get the word out there. Podcast is a little bit of a different animal, and it goes back to the purpose of the podcast and the KPI. It's hard to put money behind elements that aren't directly driving leads or brand. It's tough with a KPI of downloads only to to justify or make that huge investment. But what you can do is, with a nice mix of organic social on your part and a mix of promotion by your guests, and then you start to build it up. And as I mentioned, podcasts are an ongoing thing. You do not start out winning the gate. And that's a very interesting element too, Stu, is webinars tend to be one-off. Oh, that's a topic I'm interested in.
Yep.
Oh, that's something I want to hear about. Oh, that's great. Where podcasts, once again, like a radio show or a radio program, I like the category you're in, and I choose to listen because things are happening. Things are different. So I want things to happen. So it's not as easy to promote them as a one-off. It's easier to build an audience over time. Now, we have done some investment and some partnerships with an iHeartMedia and those types of organizations where you can put some money behind it, and you can be very organized and very programmatic about how you promote these. You can also work with other podcasts. You can work with sponsorships and podcasts that in your field that are more popular. You can get some live reads. Oh, Paychex is a sponsor of this. Check out their podcast here. And those tend to be very effective too, because you're getting a loyal audience who's listening to someone. And when they give you that endorsement, it automatically rings your bell, brings you up a level, and they're willing to give you a shot. And then, of course, you have to deliver and keep that loyal listener.
Sure. Oh, that's great. And then once you've put the podcast out to the universe, at midnight on Wednesday, or once you've run the webcast and had the live event, how do you get the most of them post-event? Either obviously with a podcast, it's post-launch and ongoing, but I guess especially with webcasts, like what do you make of those? Once you had the conversation and posted it up?
There's a variety of ways they come into place too, and a lot of that comes into where they live on your website, how findable they are. So if people are interested in this topic, is your SEO optimized? Is the experience optimized so people can easily find and get to this content if it's something of value to them? So SEO is certainly a big driver. Where they fit in terms of your editorial calendar can be a real driver. Say you have a newsletter and the topic of your newsletter in May is mental health. You can pull up past webcasts, past podcasts that focus on that topic and bring them in. So that's one of the reasons, it's one of the things that's nice about starting to have a bank of this content, is then you can start bringing it in to support your ongoing editorial calendar. And then, of course, if you have more thoughtful integrated campaigns, typically rooted around a hub page or some kind of hero page or a landing page that collects all of these assets in a place where people can get everything they want to know about mental health, then you can have all of these assets made available there as well. Sales enablement is another great place to keep these alive. You can have Salesforce emails or other tools, MailChimp, whatever it may be, where you let the sales reps know, hey, here's a great bit of content. If you've got somebody who's interested in this challenge area, we've got a great podcast on it. Might be a good door opener for you to start the conversation. And you can even mention in your email, hey, we had a great conversation with this expert on our podcast. I've got some solutions that may be able to help you address that. If this is something you're interested in, let me know. So there's a lot of different ways you can activate these after the fact. In fact, after the fact is really where podcasts run and live hard.
Yeah. We have a question from a listener specifically around polls in the webcast views, Rob. You mentioned that you use polls to attendees to ask them if they'd like to speak to an expert. And the question is, how do you follow up with this after the webinar?
After the webinar, what we'll do is we will have those, because of the way the system works, we know exactly who that attendee is, who answered yes to that poll. So they will then be sent to a dedicated sales team who knows that's where that lead came in. They understand the context of that conversation, and they could follow up directly based on that hand raising.
Yep.
And we call them hand raisers. It's a nice term because it's basically saying, because if I attend an educational webinar on mental health, I'm not expecting a sales call the next day. That's not what I was asking for.
Yes.
And I think we all get too many. I block all unknown callers. I'm tired of it. I think we all get too many calls like that. So the hand raiser is a great way to have a better experience. If you're interested, you can volunteer. If you're not, we're not going to bother you. And that's the way it should be.
Yep. 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 That's great. And how do you move on? You mentioned on Webcast, the hand raisers get follow up. Have you determined that there's a way to pull podcast listeners into the sales funnel? Or again, is that more just top of funnel advertising? Eventually the assumption is that they're going to put themselves in the funnel some other way.
It's very much top of funnel, audibly, verbally. I'll point them maybe to a relevant article on Works at the end of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And we solicit input on topics. As I mentioned earlier about the show notes, you can have links to a piece of content, an article or a gated asset, preferably a gated asset, because then once they give you their information, we can take them from an unknown to a known, and then we can start putting them in a newsletter or working with them. So you have to give these, you have to provide these mousetraps, these opportunities for people to basically trade an email address for some kind of content or information that's worthwhile and valuable to them, and is worth the exchange of knowing what happens when I give my email versus what I'm getting in return.
Yep. Yep. Makes sense. All right, Rob, my last question for you, just specifically around the value of podcasts in the sales cycle. I don't know, has Paychex done any work on assessing like what's the value of webcasts versus, for example, an article or other content formats? And I ask that because especially if you have a hand raiser, there's someone who's expressed some interest clearly in the topic and presumably in the brand. Do you find that they're more, for example, sales ready than other kinds of content consumers?
They are, Stu. They are more engaged. It is a deeper, more thoughtful, more interactive type of content. It typically, once you've experienced that kind of content, they get a better feel for you as an organization, what you're bringing. And I don't think we want to undersell the added value that content provides. Once you're in the fold, once you're part of Team Paychex or whatever the listeners, whatever organization they're in, what is that extra value you're providing beyond just your products and services? Is there a level of information? Is there a level of service? Is there a level of care that you're trying to do just to help them succeed that has nothing to do with just the product and service, but helping give them a leg up and helping them do better? Particularly small business owners. I was a small business owner for 6-7 years before taking on this role, and I was always looking for more opportunities to do better, to get more clients, to be more efficient, to be more effective, to be more productive. So there's a lot of ways organizations can help. I would say on the face of it, yes, webinars absolutely more valuable, but you can't undervalue what your good name means out there in the world and in the market. And that's where a podcast at a very low cost can do for you when you can't run a television advertising campaign. You're not running this monster print ad campaign. What you can do for very free is put together a podcast, put together good, useful content, get it out there via Podbeam or some other platform, and then spool it out to Spotify and Apple Music and all the places where people like to listen to it. And you can get out there and get in front of people for a very low cost. So for smaller organizations, I think it's a great tool. Once again, the content's got to be good, though. It's got to be something where people want to listen and people want to come back for more, because you're not just selling them, you're helping them.
Sure. No, that's a great observation. Is there anything that we've missed, Rob, in terms of the logistics of the programs or the overall benefits of the programs, or the role of webcasts and podcasts in your content marketing programs?
I guess the last thing I'd like to touch on, Stu, is the format of your podcast. Our podcasts tend to be very interview oriented, who you're bringing in as experts. And we get a lot of great value and a lot of great juice, as it were, when you have a Mark Cuban or a Jim Gaffigan on as a guest. It's exciting. They have some panache, they have a following, and it helps build up your audience. So as you look at your podcast, and if you are an interview format, see what you can do to get people that have a following of their own that can help give you that boost. The other way to go is you are the expert, and then you've got to just be very thoughtful, very mindful about your topics. I'll go back to my daughter and her true crime podcasts. It's a lady with a lovely voice who reads these stories, and they're super compelling, and my daughter can't get enough of them. And she's
Mhm.
not interviewing anyone, she's reporting. So if you have information and or content that can be educational, can be entertaining, can be useful, and you're the expert there, I would recommend you go out and give that a shot, because that's a completely different format, and it gives you a lot more freedom to showcase what you know and why it would make sense to work with you.
Mhm. Awesome. Well said. Rob, thanks so much for sharing all these hard-won insights into webcasts and podcasts. Sounds like you have a fantastic program. And I wanted to thank everyone for attending today's Fastcast. I hope you got great value. There were some great learnings today. And Rob, thanks again for your attendance, and everyone will look forward to hosting you on the next Bredin Fastcast. Take care.